Thank you, Christy. It worked. Okay, so I had a question up here. Part of the instructions that we were given was to have an opening question for people. But this is not the question that I actually want to ask. So I am going to, this was supposed to be just as you're filtering in. I'm going to go ahead and start. And thank you for joining me in this exploration of the role of the human heart in becoming a successful multiplanetary species. I want to say that this session is part science fact and part science fiction, in that science hasn't proven everything that I'm going to say yet. So it's truly an exploration, and I hope some of it will resonate with you. At the end of the presentation, we can have a conversation and or do a meditation, whatever feels right. And I encourage you to ask questions as we go. But the question that I do want to ask just a couple of people, if you feel inspired to share, why did you decide to join a session about the role of the heart in creating a multiplanetary future? Does anybody want to try it? Hi, Paula.
This is Paula. And early on, when we first started today, I started taking some notes about the mind and the heart. And a lot of it was personal. It was about how I think about things. And I started writing about follow your heart and don't get stuck in your mind. And I just started free writing this stuff, which I'd never written before. But I think that our mind, takes in our environment and our experiences and our conversations with people and what we think about things. And the heart is, this is very new to me, so I don't even know what words to find, but I think it's like more natural. The heart is who we are, not what we think we are, but who we are, because the thinking is from the mind. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and that is so well put. In fact, if I didn't say anything else, I would feel like the breakout room accomplished what I wanted it to accomplish. Thank you, Paula. Does anybody else want to share briefly? Okay, there's a raise your hand function. Please use it, because that will move you up in the queue. I can't see everybody on my screen, unfortunately. I can only see a few of you. And Christy, you'll help me too if you see any hands. Thank you. Okay, so well, I'll just share. That was beautiful, Paula. For me, this exploration originated from my own desire to understand what is the greatest personal leverage that I have available to me in contributing to the positive evolution of life on Earth. And in a way that represented the simplicity on the other side of all the complexity, because the complexity on that topic can be absolutely overwhelming, but also out of a deep conviction that I have that the simple is the profound. And I resonated a lot with the speaker before me this morning in the consciousness track on circular leadership, because I first brought an exploration about a change of heart to the business world, where I was working at the University of California, Berkeley with global corporations. And that was because at that time, I identified business as the greatest source of leverage for creating change. But today I'm sharing with you as a citizen scientist who works with trained scientists from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the HeartMath Institute, and others to help advance the science of the evolution of human consciousness. And in fact, for today, I'd like us to consider that we're all born scientists. We all question, hypothesize, predict, experiment, observe, analyze, and conclude every day in ways that are really natural to us and that are really relevant to our lives. And one of the things that we experiment a lot with, consciously or unconsciously, is our own heart. Experiments that have confused many of us about whether our hearts can reliably be trusted to help us navigate life. And, our hearts have gotten kind of a bad rap because of the disappointing results of many of those experiments. And can I just see a quick show of hands if anyone resonates with that? Yes, okay. Well, I'm going to be sharing a science fact that's demonstrating that being able to trust the guidance of our hearts is mostly a matter of training. Just as we train ourselves to think optimally, we can train our hearts to feel optimally, to sense into, as Paula was saying, who we really are and receive that heart intelligence guidance. And I believe that that could really matter in becoming successfully multiplanetary. Some of the heart feelings that many of us are aware of today are based on our experience that our planet isn't thriving. The modern world that we built, inspired largely by the dominant scientific paradigm that's based on a belief in the fundamental separation of all things, where I'm separate from you and we're separate from the planet and the rest of life, and where the values of the heart are almost completely absent, by the way. Out of that paradigm, we built a world where life has not been given permission to thrive, referring back to Janet Ivey's presentation this morning. In fact, humanity seems to be on a collision course with itself and with Earth. We can feel this if we're paying attention, and I appreciate this cartoon because it suggests that maybe the rest of the universe can feel it too. And we'll come back to that thought a little later. Captain Edgar Mitchell felt it 50 years ago when he went to space on Apollo 14 and became the 6th man to walk on the moon. Like most astronauts, Ed had advanced degrees in aeronautics and astronautics. His were from MIT. And he had so much faith in the dominant materialist reductionist scientific paradigm that he trusted his life to it by strapping himself to a rocket and letting it take him all the way to the moon. And his trust was repaid by returning him safely to Earth, but also by providing him with an epiphany that showed him that what he'd been taught by the very same science that delivered him to the moon about the nature of life and of the universe, and even about himself, as well as that science understood the world of matter, it wasn't telling him the whole story. He'd been taught that the world is fundamentally made up of discrete objects and that everything, including our consciousness, is the result of the interactions of those discrete objects. He'd been taught that only the physical manifest universe is real. But his epiphany in space revealed the opposite. It revealed that conscious is primary, not matter, and is causal of the manifest world. So Oscar, you see why I liked your comment this morning so much. So Edgar founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where I'm board chairman, as a nonprofit research institute 2 years after his return, so in 1973, because he was so changed by his experience that he dedicated his life to applying the same scientific rigor that he knew was being applied to understanding outer space, but to understanding inner space, and understanding the relationship between the two, between consciousness and the manifest world, and then bringing that understanding to the rest of humanity, because he believed that his experience signaled a new wave of evolution in human consciousness. He wanted to know from a scientific perspective how he could have the direct experience that instead of a dead universe full of discrete objects, he perceived a loving and intelligent universe in which he saw things in their separateness, but experienced them in their unity. And you might recognize this as an example of the overview effect that Mark introduced this morning, the term coined by Frank White that signifies the profound shift in awareness that astronauts experience when they see Earth from space. Most profoundly, though, Ed's epiphany revealed to him that what he called agape love, what others might call unconditional love, is the organizing principle of the entire universe. His overview effect experience was so profound that Frank White gave it the additional label of universal insight, what we might also call cosmic consciousness. More than 2/3 of all astronauts that have gone to space report some experience of the overview effect and even universal insight. But not these guys. Here are two astronauts looking at Earth from space, and one is saying to the other, "Makes you feel more significant than everyone else, doesn't it?" Of course, this is funny because no astronaut has ever said that, at least not that they'll admit. But like the last comic, it also points to a potential truth, which is that there are big ranges of responses to the overview effect that have been reported. Some have reported gaining religion, some have reported losing it, feeling that their experience in space was just too big to be contained by the dogma of any religion. In the movie Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, if anyone saw that, that was based on an astronaut whose worldview couldn't accommodate the expanded perception that seeing Earth from space gave her, and she had a very difficult time readjusting to life back on Earth. When people asked Ed Mitchell why his overview experience seemed different from other astronauts, he'd reply that while the experience was pretty much the same for everyone, the interpretation or the meaning given to the experience was often different. I had retired NASA astronaut Mae Jemison, the first Black woman in space and mission specialist on the Space Shuttle Endeavour, as a guest on a program I did for IONS exploring the overview effect and collective consciousness. And I asked her the same question. And she answered that, in her opinion, what an astronaut sees in space depends on who they are when they go up. So while an overview effect experience is never wasted on anyone, it feels urgent that we optimize the transformational potential of going to space if we're going to become a successful multiplanetary species, that we prepare ourselves to accommodate increasingly expanded realities so we can be the people we need to be when we go up. And I believe this is another reason why Ed founded IONS, so that we could learn through science how to help create profound transformation in ourselves, whether we go to space or not. We can think of transformation in human beings as changes in the ways that we perceive and give shape to reality. And of course, there are many ways that transformation happens. We don't need to go to space to be transformed by a perception of the organizing power of unconditional love. Even without our own direct experience, wisdom traditions around the world and throughout time teach the same thing, and many of us intuitively sense it. But as a whole, humanity isn't operating in alignment with this principle. And that may be why we seem to be on a collision course with life. Certainly, we don't want to end up on a collision course with space. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I can stop at any time. I'm going to move into another section now, which has to do with that while not every astronaut comes home with this perception, and while science has yet to prove that it's true, if science would demonstrate this truth, and some of us are working on it, maybe humanity would commit ourselves to aligning with it. But even though mainstream science isn't currently telling this story, which matters, of course, because science is one of the most important, most powerful storytellers in the history of the modern world, it is telling a story that challenges its own paradigm, and to me points to a way that this bigger universal story about love as an organizing principle of the whole universe could also be true. It's the power of unconditional love as an organizing principle in, wait for it, our own bodies, and how we can partner with our own hearts to align with it. That story is of the art and science of heart coherence, which put simply means the alignment of our heart, brain, and body in ways that can change everything. We have an intuitive feeling for what coherence in general means. Like, we try to be coherent in our thinking and in our speech so we can be understood. We try to behave in ways that are coherent with our values. We want to be part of a coherent family, coherent teams, and society. Coherence always implies order, harmony, connection, a dynamic stability, and the efficient use of energy in a system. If these guys row together coherently, they're going to get to the other side and in the best, most efficient way possible. In the physical world, coherence exists at every scale, from atoms to galaxies, and from people to planets. Nature is encoded with coherence. Nature forms greater, more complex wholes through coherence. It transcends its own limitations through coherence. In living systems, coherence means the parts of the system are in harmonious communication with each other, whether it be through magnetic or biochemical means, or through pressure and sound waves, or even through quantum entanglement. In fact, some scientists define quantum entanglement or quantum coherence as what makes the difference between a living system and a non-living system. Because coherence has this ability to heal the fragmentation in any system, it can be considered an organizing principle. And when coherence in the human body is caused by the heart, it's called heart coherence. Turns out that the heart is the most powerful driver of coherence in the human body. And one of the primary drivers of heart coherence is, wait for it, love. In fact, the HeartMath Institute, who coined the term heart coherence, considers it to be the physiological signature of love at the core of the human system. Because we naturally shift into greater coherence when we experience authentic regenerative emotions. Regenerative emotions being those emotions that actually bring life force into our bodies as opposed to draining it, like love and compassion, gratitude and appreciation, like the awe and reverence that we imagine Ed felt in space that gave him his epiphany. This kind of coherence benefits our whole being. So let me show you what I mean. How many people have seen this image? Is the work of HeartMath? No, okay. Let me just see if I can scroll here a little bit. Okay. The work of HeartMath has become pretty well known. I've been working with them since the 90s. I brought them into my programs at UC Berkeley. Physiologically speaking, our coherence is best reflected in the patterns of our heart rhythms. And here are two very different sets of heart rhythms from the same person. You can actually see how love and other regenerative emotions listed here on the right side, appreciation, calm, patience, and confidence, are organizing the heart rhythms. Heart rhythm patterns are based on plotting heart rate variability, or the space between heartbeats, not the heartbeats themselves. On the left is a state many of us walk around in much of the time. It's a relatively incoherent signal. You can tell by looking at it. It reflects frustration and feelings of disharmony. And it's common in ordinary consciousness because of the many stresses of modern everyday life. Of course, we need to honor all of our emotions, but it can be life-changing to realize that these emotions of incoherence act in the body to degrade our functioning, especially when we perceive life in ways that make these emotions chronic, like having a glass half empty perspective. This actually inhibits our brain functioning and our overall well-being. We become a less intelligent, less resilient system because we are less connected within ourselves and actually with the world around us. On the right is an example of the sign-like waveform of a coherent heart rhythm. And the heart pattern that naturally emerges when we experience feelings of love, especially unconditional love, of gratitude, especially unconditional gratitude, appreciation, compassion, any authentic regenerative emotion. You can actually feel the difference just by looking at these two patterns. And these heart patterns especially affect the brain centers involved in perception, emotional experience, and self-regulation. We can have a quick experience now of how rapidly our thoughts affect our bodies just by thinking a thought that brings us happiness, and then thinking of something that stresses us out. I almost played a short video from Google Doodles that was on in honor of Earth Day yesterday, showing our degrading Earth, to give you something to stress out about. But these days, it's hard to pay attention to what's happening without stressing out. So I'm skipping that. And instead, I'm sharing that I was in India a couple of years ago with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, when he said that when the world looks bad, look at a flower. There is another truth. Even when there's no physical flower, we can put our attention on the truth that it represents. He's not advising that we stick our heads in the sand. He's not advising that we deny our feelings, but he knows the healing energy that's available from perceiving the glass as half full. He knows the power of being able to intentionally self-regulate our emotions for our benefit. He knows the power of being able to intentionally shift ourselves in the moment from the rhythms on the left to the rhythms on the right, and then being able to shift the world from that more intelligent, more connected, more empowered place. And of course, we don't have to look at a flower. It could be a whale in space, which happens to be an image that makes me happy. So we hear a lot from science about how powerful the brain is, but not about the power of the human heart, other than when it stops beating, we stop living, which is pretty powerful if you think about it. This beautiful organ will beat 2.5 billion times during an average lifetime, approximately 100,000 times a day without a conscious thought. Some of the things we're not taught. The heart is actually an organ of perception with a sophisticated, complex, intrinsic nervous system that's sometimes called the heart brain, that enables the heart to learn, sense, feel, and remember independently of the brain in the head. I think it's got about it's a network of about 40,000 neurons. And I have to say that Janet Ivey's comment this morning about perhaps we may need artificial hearts in space gave me pause, because what if the human heart is more than a pump? What if it's the organ that senses love as an organizing principle in human beings? It's something to think about. Another fact is that the heart and the brain are communicating with each other all the time. But in this communication, the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, and has a much larger electromagnetic field than the brain. In fact, it's the largest electromagnetic field in the body. In fetal development, the heart forms and starts beating before the brain is even developed. So it gives one a different picture of the heart than you might get from, a Valentine's Day card. I meant to have that heart beating for you while I said those things. Okay, so most importantly, while the science gives us confidence about the heart, and there's plenty of it, just as we don't need to be a mechanic to drive our cars. We don't need to be a neurocardiologist to learn how to consciously work with our hearts. In this way, heart coherence is actually more of an art than a science. It's a highly trainable skill. It's a measurable state that we can intentionally cultivate to become not just an occasional state, but actually a durable trait that gives us reliable access to our higher order functioning, including expanded perception, higher creativity and cognition, clearer intuition. The heart is thought of as the seat of intuition, and improved physical and emotional resilience. Like I said, when we started, we can train the heart like we train the brain. We can exercise this muscle like we exercise our other muscles. So we can have more access to our innate coherence. Coherence is actually natural to us. It's everywhere in nature, and we are a part of nature. But we have free will. So it's a choice. And making that choice is the change of heart that I'm referring to. Retired NASA Mars mission astronaut Yvonne Kegel said to me that the most challenging part of long-term space travel and colonizing Mars, sorry for that word, won't be the technology challenge. It will be the human challenge. It will be the inner human landscape, not the Mars landscape, that challenges us the most. It will be the place from which we perceive what's happening. A heart conditioned to perceive from fear, or a heart conditioned to perceive from love, will determine what happens next for our species. Sometimes fear is the correct perception, but more often it's not. Our hearts are also sensitive detectors of our environment, responsive not only to geophysical influences, but also to astrophysical ones, just like our technology. Earth's electromagnetic fields are influenced by changes in solar weather, and the heart is the most responsive part of the body to this dynamic activity. When we become skilled at creating coherence within ourselves, we become more resilient and can make the most of these excess energy flows, unlike our technology, which doesn't have a choice, it just fries. Because each heartbeat produces electricity, the heart generates a powerful magnetic field, just like Earth, that radiates external to the body and can be measured with magnetometers. The vibrational pattern of the field changes in real time based on our thoughts, feelings, and attitudes, because they are encoded. Our heart signals are encoded in these fields. We can also measure how our field affects people around us, because our fields are overlapping with each other's all the time. And they're even overlapping with Earth's fields. We're beginning to demonstrate how humanity may be able to affect our shared energetic field and our shared reality. There is, in fact, decades of scientific evidence that suggests that large numbers of people creating heart-centered or regenerative states of love, compassion, or gratitude can influence a collective shared field of energy toward greater coherence that can help offset planet-wide incoherence. And this is like the most important part for me. Because remember what we said about nature creating greater, more complex wholes through coherence. What is a multiplanetary future if not a greater, more complex whole? At the same time, people like physicist Erwin Laszlo are acknowledging that humanity seems to be gaining in complexity, but lagging in coherence. And that reminds me of a popular animated comedy in the US, and in a particular episode, one of the characters reveals that he's Kevrin Zaxor, an alien ambassador for New World testing. and that everything that happened in the episode was really just a test to see if Earth was worthy of joining the intergalactic community. But humans proved to be too selfish, too greedy, too chaotic, I'll just say too incoherent, to join the rest of the universe, and as punishment for failing, they isolate Earth and the moon from the rest of the universe. So like I said, the show is a comedy, and I laughed at this, but at the same time, I was a little like, because like the other cartoons I used today, it may also be pointing to a potential truth. What if the universe is watching through that hospital window? I was on a Space for Humanity call a while back when the presenter reminded us that much of the technology that's responsible for our being able to expand into the universe is technology that humans originally created to destroy each other with. If unconditional love is the organizing principle of the universe, as it is in our bodies, not a big leap, we'll either ignore this at our peril or learn to use it to evolve our species into a coherent multiplanetary future, what Dr. Laszlo calls super coherence, which is coherent systems within coherent systems. So in a world with a doomsday clock that predicts humanity is only 100 seconds away from a catastrophic midnight, and that was even before the Ukraine crisis started, we have to look for solutions that we have access to, that we personally can employ with real leverage if we are going to survive long enough to become multiplanetary. The famous futurist Buckminster Fuller wrote in his book, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, that Earth came with no instruction book. But I feel certain that if he had known about the science of heart coherence, he would have included it in his manual as the organizing principle for, in his words, converting humankind's tendency toward oblivion into a realization of our potential. Because Bucky Fuller also considered love metaphysical gravity. And he believed that to usher in any new era of humanity, we should always start with the universe. So I'm going to end the presentation part by sharing a very resonant message from longtime space entrepreneur and space activist Rick Tumlinson that gave me real hope that this exploration of love as an organizing principle in the universe could be taken seriously by the space community. He's described in Wikipedia as part agitator and part operator, and a strong advocate of creating commercial opportunities in space. And he ended his talk during a recent overview roundtable by sharing some of his operating principles. And the first one is honor and evolve civilization. He said that it's not that humanity is more violent, it's just that we're able to be more violent with less effort and greater impacts because of technology. And I'm saying something similar. We can be more coherent with less effort, excuse me, and greater impact by employing the technology of the human heart. The second one was trump or top the environmental movement by not just saving Earth, but by expanding Earth. And I say that abiding by the organizing principle of unconditional love will give us our best shot at doing both. And the third was experience the universe. Rick said, we are how the universe experiences itself. And I'm saying amen to that. Amen to all of these operating principles. And I'm asking as my parting question to you, we were asked to give you a parting question. What experience do you wish for the universe to have? And what are you willing to do to make it so? That's the end of the formal presentation. And if there are any questions or comments, I'm going to look in the chat here, or we can do a meditation together. So let me just check if there are any questions.
I want to make sure, well, first to say thank you. And I want to make sure that you mention the name of the show that you were talking about earlier, where the cartoon was being tested in the throughout the episode.
Yeah, I didn't mention it because it's it's kind of edgy, but it's South Park.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got 2 people wanted to know in the chat, so I wanted to make sure it got answered. And
Thank
it looks
you.
like Christopher did have a great comment. I don't know if you'd like to unmute Christopher, and then if anybody wants to use the raising hands function, we're welcome to discuss. And if it's quiet, then sure, let's meditate.
Well, there are some, would you mind pulling some of the questions in the chat, Christy? Well, there was one other, let's see. Is Helen here? Oh, Helen sent it directly to me.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Would you mind asking your question?
Yes. I was just thinking that incoherence and coherence. Now, would we or could we say that incoherence, well, definitely it affects the energy that that surround us, flowing through us. And I was thinking that this incoherence energy can be seen as entropy, that it is more chaos, it's chaotic, that the energy flowing through us gets very chaotic, whereas coherence affects our energy in a way that's more calming. We are more stable and can get answers to questions that we may have through just ourselves.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh.
I completely agree. So the way I see it is, if you consider entropy to be the loss of information in a system,
Right.
neg entropy is the gaining of information in a system,
Right.
and coherence is that. It is the gaining of information in a system through connecting the individual intelligences that are part of that system and creating a greater whole system. And the way you can actually see, it's almost like nesting dolls, because it's like it happens first within ourselves. And then, because the heart is actually transpersonal, it has an electromagnetic field that reaches out into our environment. We are actually, through resonance, resonance is a mechanism for the exchange of information. We are exchanging information with people, other life in our environment, even with the planet. You know, there's a lot of recognition in science right now that human beings are affected by Earth's electromagnetic field or geomagnetic field. But we don't talk about is, I'm not sure what I just said. People are affected by Earth's geomagnetic field. Is that what I said?
Yes.
Okay, science acknowledges that. But there isn't a lot of acknowledgement that Earth may actually be affected by humanity's electromagnetic field. And this is what I really care about when it comes to being an Earth species, that we may actually be interfering with the planet's innate coherence. Now, it may not be, it may be just way too strong for us to impact, but in becoming a multiplanetary species, I think it's an important consideration. What are we bringing as vibratory beings.
Yes, I've had an experience, anyways, through sharing of energy with nature, which produced very high vibration. I had a certain experience and actually a healing in my body. Now I'm thinking to myself, okay, this happened to me. If a group of people would share together with nature, it may also affect the earth. It'll affect nature, besides affecting the people themselves, their bodies. Would you agree to that?
I would agree. Now, remember, I'm speaking as a citizen scientist, but I also know that there is science that shows that human beings can affect the structure of water. And I'm currently involved in an experiment that's coming online with the Global Coherence Initiative that is going to be looking at the relationship between human energy fields and the energy fields of trees, because trees have energy fields as well.
Oh my goodness.
The point is, what we're hoping to do, that this is the Global Consciousness Project, and you can see it on the bottom there, but we have a variety of sensor networks. And through this variety of sensor networks, we are studying the relationship between a critical mass of human energy and instruments, like physical instruments, random number generators, the relationship between a critical mass of human energy and earth fields themselves, and then also with trees. So between all three of those, it's kind of, it is an edge science. And so it has to be really tight to convince the current paradigm that it's good science. And one of the ways we're approaching that is by, if looking at trees tells one story, and then looking at Earth's magnetic fields tells one story, and looking at a network of random number generators tells a story, and they're all the same story, it's more convincing than if we were only looking at one.
I have to add that my experience, I had a incurable cancer. No, there was no cure for it. I refused all treatments. I had an experience in sharing my energy with actually a tree. And through that experience of sharing my energy with the tree, I visualized energy going through me and the ground, up the roots of the tree and back to me. And I kept this up, I don't know for how long. And all of a sudden I was in this white golden light. I don't know how long I was there. And all of a sudden I was back. In about a month and a half, I started to notice that my cancer, it was plaques on my skin, were clearing. So anyways, what I'm trying to say, that I'm really interested in such projects, because I have proof through doctors' documentation, and this is 25 years ago. So it isn't just
Wow.
it isn't just all of a sudden I went into remission. This is past remission. So I am very interested in this. And if I go to the site that you
Yes.
mentioned on the bottom, would I be able to communicate with anyone?
Yes, and I'm going to put my email in the chat,
Great.
so you can communicate with me, and I will help you get whatever it is you are looking for, or get you involved. I'm giving you my Institute of Noetic Sciences email, Helen, and you might want to check out ions too, because ion studies the kind of phenomenon that you just experienced, these kinds of self-healings through energy. We have an exceptional healer study that we just completed. And I think you might find a really resonant community there as well.
Oh, that's great. I am really very interested.
You know, I'm interested in what you're saying too from a multiplanetary perspective, because if we have such a profound relationship with nature, with trees, etc., what's it going to be like to be on a planet without those forms of organic life, without that healing environment? I think it makes an even stronger case for our ability, our need to be able to self-regulate and create the kind of coherence within ourselves, regardless of whatever kind of environment that we're in.
Yes, I definitely agree. If you would like my email, I don't mind sharing it.
Oh, sure, but put it in the chat, please, Helen, because this is being
Yeah.
recorded. I don't think you want everybody to know it.
No,
I'm going to
right.
put my email in for everyone, because that just went to you, Helen. And I see iPhone has a hand up. Helen, thank you so much for that really profound sharing.
Thank you.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
This is a great event. Thank you so much, Claudia, for your coherent presentation. Loved
Thank you.
it. You're talking about solar flares and all of this electromagnetic events cosmically. My question is, how can we protect ourselves? I mean, I believe most people in here are very intuitive and very sensitive. I don't know how you feel, but I feel really a shift in the change happening. And I've been involved into health and healing for the past 20 years. It comes natural to me, but right now I'm very, looking into things on how to protect our own bodies, other than the traditional stuff, eating healthy and doing.
May I ask for your first name?
My name is Hien.
Hien.
Yes.
You may not be surprised that my answer is to become skilled at cultivating greater coherence in our bodies. The reason being that when we are in this coherent phase, when our hearts have that sine wave-like form, we actually resonate with the coherence of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, through resonance, there is an exchange of information. So we're actually strengthened by the coherence of this entire planet. And the reason that I really appreciate your question is because I have the same question. I have a question about 5G and being immersed in these different frequencies that are known to be unhealthy to people. And I have asked the scientists at HeartMath about it. What do they think about all this 5G? I mean, isn't this really, and it's being coherent that is going to help protect us the most because of this resonance with Earth. In other words, Earth is just like a really strong resonator. And in spite of everything, the waves, the energy that we are resonating with is actually the energy that comes from the iron core of the Earth. And that's just super strong. And so sometimes I even just like to visualize that I am coupling with that coherent energy. Did that help?
Yeah, totally. So basically raising our own frequency. What does the spiritual community mean when they say we become, our bodies become, what did they say, crystallized or something? When the shift is going to happen to 5D, you know?
Oh, you know, I really don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
But
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Is it Shaba? Saba?
Hi, Claudia.
Hi.
It's Saba.
Hi, Saba.
Thank you for your talk. Super interesting. I'm really interested in the work of ions. I actually, my background is in space, but I didn't really know about Edgar Mitchell's, life and experience until I read Entangled Minds from Dean
Oh, yes.
Radin, which was talking about kind of the entanglement and consciousness aspect. So I'm super interested in that. And also kind of related to our earlier talk, because my background is in engineering and space studies, but now I'm researching sustainability, basically sustainable behavior, and how the overview effect can be simulated with virtual reality.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of these topics that we're discussing today are really interconnected. You're talking about how we have this influence on the earth, but in typical like scientific fields, and I know coming from a very technical background, we don't tend to take this stuff very seriously, which is very unfortunate, I think, because as you said, it's you're trying to go against kind of the paradigm of what science is now.
Yes.
So I think especially with consciousness, I'm really super curious how we can potentially use the overview effect as a phenomenon to also study consciousness. And I was wondering what kind of measurements do you typically look at when you want to measure consciousness or compare it?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. First, I just want to comment on what you said about sustainability, because so central to this work is the recognition, because I used to work in sustainability myself before doing this. And I came to the personal realization that there is no sustainability in the world if there isn't sustainability in humanity, if we are not as sustainable inside. And actually sustainable isn't the right concept anymore anyway. It wasn't even the right concept 20 years ago or 25 years ago. It is about regeneration. And it just feels like my direct knowing is that we won't build a regenerative world, a regenerative economy, or regenerative agriculture until we are a regenerative species, until we learn how to regenerate ourselves. The world changes when we change. That's my belief. And the overview effect, it's interesting because I'm just studying or starting a study on the overview effect and how it changes a person's psychophysiology with the Arthur C. Clarke Center at the University of California, San Diego. And we are going to be studying heart rate variability, obviously, and a lot of the measures of the brain and skin conductivity and all of the things that scientists are already aware of that typically respond to changes in emotional states. I think that when we have a lot of data or a critical mass of data that tells the story that, wow, something really profound happens in human beings when they see Earth from space, that is going to help quite a bit. And if you saw the session before this one on circular leadership, I think you can see that the VROE company, which is Anahita, one of the organizers here, is working with a group of leadership consultants to bring the overview effect in virtual reality to business leaders. That's going to help a lot. The Institute of Noetic Sciences, I was an executive producer on the Edgar Mitchell overview effect virtual reality experience, where we use his actual words, where he describes what his experience is. So I think I'm hoping that those things make a difference. And I think that more and more innovative ways to use the overview experience will help. And I should mention one more, which is Space for Humanity, where I'm on the board. And our mission is actually to send citizen astronauts into space, to get as many people into space as possible by democratizing access to space through providing access to people who wouldn't ordinarily have access to go. Long answer. Sorry for the long answer.
No, thank you. I think you touched on a lot of great points and great organizations that I'm also talking to Anahita and Frank White about my PhD research. So I'd love to learn more about the work you're doing, especially because I'm trying to do something similar. So I'll definitely get in touch about that. Thank you.
Please, I put my email in the chat, and thank you for what you're doing, because by studying this and making it a valid research topic, that's going to change things too. It's amazing how few people were doing what you're doing just a few years ago compared to now. Okay, well, I want to thank you all for being here with me, and please be in touch if I can help you with your own inquiry in any way. Thank you, Christy, for being the moderator today and for recording this session. And I think it's time to leave this room and go back to the big room. Oh, there's a break, and then we reconvene in the big room. Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Claudia. That was a really great presentation, and I'm glad I was selected to moderate it. It hit a lot of points.
Thank you. All right, see everybody on the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you.